The 5 Gentlecolts. My Little Pony fanfic by StarThief. Chapter 4. The Farmer. Twilight was walking while looking at the trees lining the dirt road that led to Sweet Apple Acres. Spike was sitting on her back, eating a few gems she had given him that morning. Remind me why we're coming here again? Well, I wanted to see if Applejack has some of that multicolored jelly they usually make. I read a spell that needs the nutrients from that kind of apple, so maybe the jelly will help. Although, if he doesn't have any, I'll have to wait until the season. I don't think I'll still be in this world by then. Spike swallowed when he heard that. When you say it like that, you sound like a pony in the terminal phase. The little dragon said, a bit nervous. Twilight realized and smiled with a bit of embarrassment. I mean, I'll already be back home by then. Because the 30 moons will have passed. Don't you miss your original Twilight? Spike looked up at the sky, thinking. Yeah, a lot, but at the same time you're here. And that's weird, because you're her but you're not her. It's good to know there's someone who understands how I feel, hee, said Twilight. She stopped suddenly and then looked ahead, realizing she could see a huge cloud of dust, until she realized it was a large stampede of cows. Twilight, run! Spike shouted as he clung to her. Twilight nodded and turned to start running as fast as she could, but that stampede seemed to be coming much faster. Little by little, it was gaining on her. Her endurance in this body was not the same as in her original body, plus, she didn't have her wings to fly away. Little by little she felt herself running out of strength. She tried to pull off to the side of the path at some point, but everything was lined with fences, so she'd have to jump, and she didn't know if she'd be able to do that with this body. She was about to try when she finally fell to the ground along with Spike. She quickly tried to get up and regain speed with the dragon, but she could feel the ground shaking harder. They were just about to be trampled, so she had no other ideas left but to throw herself over the little dragon to protect him from the blows they were about to take. Something there! A pony shouted from the orchard. It was Applejack, who arrived quickly with his lasso and jumped over the fence to stand in front of Twilight, rope in his mouth. He planted his hooves firmly, wearing a serious expression, and locked eyes with the cow at the front of the stampede. At first there was no reaction, it looked like he was going to be run over too, but then he dug his hooves into the ground even more. All of a sudden, the stampede came to a stop, and the lead cow ended up just a few centimeters from the pony. The cows stared at him in fear, while he didn't react at all. What were you thinking? The pony said. The cows looked at each other, and then the one leading the group spoke. We're sorry, honey, but there was a snake in the... Applejack took off his hat, letting an old, worn-out hose fall out of it. It was just trash. Be more careful when you think you see something. You could have hurt my friend. Now get back to your work. Applejack then looked at the unicorn behind him. Oh, how awful. We're really sorry about this, Applejack, and you too, little one. Twilight just looked at them and smiled nervously. Don't worry about it. The cows left, heading back to the farm, leaving the 3 of them alone on that path. Twilight watched as Applejack held out a hoof to her. His serious, imposing expression from a few seconds ago was gone, and now that soft, kind smile of his was back as he looked at her. Twilight blushed a little and then took his hoof. She stood up, lifting Spike up with her. Thank you. What was that? I've hardly ever seen you act that serious. Serious? Twilight realized what she'd said and smiled awkwardly. Well, my Applejack is serious, but he doesn't usually come off as that stern, not the way you just were with the cows. Oh, well. If I don't stand firm, they don't listen, simple as that. I learned that over time, working on the farm isn't exactly easy. Anyway, what brings you out here? It's nice to see you again. Well, I'm a little embarrassed, but I came to ask you a favor. Sure, I'll be glad to help. Come on, follow me, we were just about to eat, hee hee. Little Mac made some really good soup, and Apple Bloom is learning how to make desserts. Those I can't promise anything about, said the orange pony as he started walking. Twilight was a little surprised, since he didn't even ask what the favor was, he just agreed without any problem. She just started following him until she caught up with his pace. Tell me, Twilight. What am I like where you come from? Well, pretty similar, but there are some differences too. You're not as tall, in fact, Little Mac is called Big Mac there because she's the tallest of you. But that doesn't make you any less strong. I'm actually sure you're the strongest pony I know. I've seen you crack trees with your hind hooves. Wow. I can get that strong. Do I train or something? Well, your strength increased after the Tree of Harmony gave us. It's a long story, but even so, I'm sure you've got very similar strength here. Tree of Harmony? Applejack asked at the same time as Spike. I don't want to overwhelm you guys. He, said Twilight. Applejack nodded and kept walking, and after a few seconds they could see the farm in the distance. They weren't far now. Is it true you went to Cloudsdale with Rainbow Dash? He asked in a slightly more serious tone, without letting her see his face. Yes, he helped me get some materials to make the book that would let me contact my friends. I did it thanks to him, Twilight said enthusiastically. Applejack noticed that enthusiasm, and, even though it was more about the book than the trip, he didn't know that and felt like the reason was Rainbow. He didn't say anything, but now the story Rainbow had told about that kiss didn't seem quite so fake. Spike noticed Applejack's expression getting a bit more serious, then looked at Twilight. He didn't completely understand, but he did know that the whole Cloudsdale topic seemed to be something that made the farmer uncomfortable. APPL. We're here. Welcome to Sweet Apple Acres, Applejack said, suddenly in a very good mood, unintentionally interrupting Spike. Twilight smiled with excitement at seeing the place. It was familiar enough to her, but she also wanted to know what the other apples were like in this world, so as soon as Applejack gave the signal to follow him, she nodded and did so. Meanwhile, Spike watched the two of them curiously. For a moment he thought about bringing up what had happened a few seconds ago, but decided not to. He didn't want to make things awkward. They walked until they reached the Apple family house, and once there, Spike slid down from Twilight's back to go inside, but before they reached the door a loud shout came from one of the upstairs windows. Grandpa! A small colt shouted. Applejack immediately knew what was going on and looked at Twilight, nervous. Within seconds, the door opened in front of them and the three of them saw a little pony with a yellow coat and red mane. I was right. Grandpa, Little Mac, my brother finally brought a girl home. Apple Blue. Before Applejack could do anything, the colt ran off toward the kitchen in search of the rest of the family. Applejack was about to go after him, but stayed for Twilight's sake. He just let out a sigh and stepped aside to let the unicorn in. I'm sorry about that. Twilight just smiled and nodded, then went in. Once inside, she saw a red-coated mare with an orange mane coming down the stairs. They had seen each other before. It was Little Mac. When she saw Twilight, she smiled but didn't say anything, simply letting Applejack lead Twilight to the kitchen. Once they went in, with Spike in tow, the red mare followed behind them, almost like a guard. When they all arrived, they saw Apple Bloom excitedly talking to Grandpa, who just nodded with a smile from his chair. She's really pretty. And she's a unicorn, imagine that. He could be an uncle to unicorns and they'd help us get the apples down faster. The Apple family would have Unicorn. Twilight and Applejack both turned completely red when they heard the little one talking. Grandpa saw the four of them come in and just smiled. "Well, my grandson wasn't lying, you're quite a pretty little lady. Come on, take a seat, make yourself at home," said the very elderly pony as he got up and walked over to the stove, where the food was, to serve a plate for the guests. Apple Bloom ran to one of the chairs and pulled it out so Twilight could sit down. "This one's for you," he said with a big smile that was lit up by his eyes full of excitement. Still blushing, Twilight sat down and patted the colt on the head. "Thank you very much, hee. Don't mention it, Grandpa always says we have to be real Gentlecolts with ladies." "Hey, Applejack, you should have given her the seat, you're a terrible boyfriend," Apple Bloom said. "Well, little Apple, you were too fast, you didn't give me the chance, but don't worry, next time I'll do it," Applejack said as he walked toward a seat. As he passed by Apple Bloom, he stopped to whisper, "Next time I'll do it because I'll make sure you never walk again for embarrassing me like that." Apple Bloom just stuck his tongue out at him playfully, and when he saw that Applejack was heading to a chair far away from Twilight, he quickly sat there himself. "Nope, you sit next to your girlfriend." Little Mac was barely holding back her laughter next to the little dragon. They were both sitting side by side without realizing it, but they had the exact same expression as they tried not to burst out laughing. Twilight chose not to say anything and just stared at the table, her cheeks completely red. Applejack sighed and sat next to Twilight, then mumbled apologies to her. The unicorn shook her head, letting him know he didn't need to worry. Grandpa served Twilight and Spike their plates. The rest already had theirs before the two of them had arrived, so once he sat down. "Ahem. Apple Bloom. Oh, right, it's my turn," the little one said, putting his hooves together and closing his eyes. "Thanks for the food and tomorrow's food and the day after's food. All done." As soon as he finished saying that, he immediately started eating. He was so fast that Twilight could barely see his hooves move as he used his spoon. In the end, she also started eating, but her eyes widened completely as she reacted to the flavor. It was delicious. "Wow, this is amazing, Little Mac." The mayor was surprised to hear her say that. No one had mentioned who cooked. "I told her, calm down," Applejack said. That calmed his sister a little, but she still lowered her gaze out of embarrassment at the compliment. "Yup," she said in a somewhat low tone. "So, Twilight, right?" Grandpa said. "We finally have the pleasure of really meeting you. I know you came here during the summer sun celebration to try the food, but I'm afraid we were all so busy that I couldn't say hello. Still, our dear Applejack wouldn't stop talking about you." Applejack tried to stay calm, though he was being consumed by embarrassment. He was excited about having a new friend. "He mentioned that Pinky threw you a party before the festival, hee. Gee grand. That's right, it was a very good party. WL. At least that's what they tell me, I'm afraid I missed it." "You missed your own party?" Apple Bloom asked. Twilight smiled, a little ashamed. "When I first got to Ponyville, I really didn't want to be here. I wanted to go back to Canterlot as soon as possible, so I shut myself in and waited for the party to end. Nowadays I realize that my attitude back then wasn't the best. I was blinded by my ignorance about friendship." Applejack was surprised, because yes, that was exactly what had happened, but he hadn't forgotten that the Twilight sitting next to him was from another world. He was surprised they'd had the same first impressions. "But, at least now I'm happy to have friends like Applejack. It's definitely the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life." Applejack smiled when he heard her. Even though he knew she was talking about her friends, he still felt warm inside, because she was an exact copy of him, just from another reality. In the end, he decided not to overcomplicate his thoughts with that and kept eating. Grandpa just looked at his grandson and smiled faintly. Now he understood his distracted behavior these last few days, but it was obvious he couldn't just step in and say something, so he tried to give him a discreet nudge. "Do you like stallions like my grandson?" The old pony asked with a smile. To him, at least, that counted as discreet help. Twilight and Applejack nearly spat out their food in surprise at that question. Spike and Little Mac couldn't hold back any longer and finally let out loud bursts of laughter. At that, Applejack glared at his older sister, but still tried his best to keep his composure because Twilight was there. "WL. I. Twilight said, practically stammering with nerves. "Twilight and I are just friends. There's no need to keep asking questions like that. She only came because she needed help and I decided to invite her to eat. There's nothing more to it. She's my friend, and that's that," Applejack said with seriousness and firmness. "And do you like girls like her?" Apple Bloom asked, though this time he wasn't trying to tease. He genuinely got curious and asked innocently. Applejack froze at the question. The answer could go badly, because if he said no, he might make her feel bad, but if he said yes, it could imply something. Plus, deep down, he thought that what he said might affect whether he had a chance with her. Even though it was a very fleeting thought, he still shook his head a bit and looked toward the unicorn, hoping she'd try to dodge the question, but he was even more surprised when he saw that she was actually looking at him now. She was obviously nervous and embarrassed by the situation too, but her eyes also showed curiosity about what his answer would be. Basically, without realizing it, she had him cornered as well. That's a good question, Apple Bloom. After all, Applejack never lies," Grandpa said. "Yeah. He is the element of honesty, after all," Twilight said under her breath. Applejack blushed even more and, just as he was about to answer, he stopped himself and stood up from the table. "I forgot to fix the barn roof," he said, then hurried out of there. Everyone watched him go and started laughing, especially Spike and Little Mac, but Twilight kept looking in the direction he'd gone. "I'm sorry about all this, Twilight. I hope you understand they're just family jokes," Grandpa said. Twilight just nodded with a smile and kept eating, though she tried to hurry so she could catch up with Applejack. After a while, Twilight went into the barn Apple Bloom had pointed out, the one with the broken roof, so she assumed Applejack had gone there. She was levitating Applejack's plate of food with her magic, since he'd barely eaten anything because of the situation. She stepped in carefully and quickly heard the sound of hammering. When she looked up, she saw Applejack on a ladder, finishing hammering in some nails. It looked like he'd already fixed the roof from the outside and was now finishing the inside. "I brought you your plate," Twilight said. When Applejack heard her, he was surprised, and because of that the ladder wobbled. He quickly fell. Twilight ran to the ladder and used her magic to catch him, but in this reality's body she still lacked strength, so Applejack ended up falling on top of her. Luckily, the plate stayed floating. Now the two of them were on the ground, on the hay, Applejack on top of her. They looked at each other, both blushing. The orange pony quickly got up and moved away, but at once helped the unicorn to her hooves too. I am sorry," Applejack said. Twilight smiled and shook her head. "No, forgive me. And I'm sorry about earlier. I think the whole situation was..." "Yeah. Sorry it got so awkward. I played my part in that too. I reheated your plate and brought it so you could eat." Applejack looked at the plate floating in the unicorn's magic and smiled faintly. "You didn't have to. Come on, eat. I've already given you so much trouble, it'd be awful if you didn't eat because of me. Go on." "Oh, come on, Chui." Before Applejack could finish talking, the spoon went straight into his mouth, guided by the unicorn's magic. Almost like an obedient foal, he sat down on one of the hay bales, still being careful, and sighed. "Little Max got Mom's touch in the kitchen. I can't say no." Twilight smiled and sat next to him. Finally, Applejack took the plate and spoon himself and began eating with her beside him. At first there was a bit of awkward silence, but then Applejack looked at her. "Where's Spike?" "Playing a board game with Little Mac." "He plays that too?" "Wow, hee. Yeah. It's fun actually, especially when Discord's in the game." "Discord?" There'll be time to talk about that later, hee. Anyway. What was the favor you needed? "Forget it, I've already troubled you enough, just eat in peace." "I want to know." "Well, I wanted to know if you had any Zap apples or Zap apple jam." Twilight said, a little embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry, Sugar Cube. But Rainbow was here not long ago and he and Grandpa polished off the last jar. That hoofbrain loves the jam, he's one of the first to buy jars, and when sales end he comes here to eat with us, hee. At first it was obvious that was his whole intention, it was a bit annoying, but now it's almost a habit and we always save a jar for him, Grandpa and he almost always end up chatting while they eat it." "Well, thank you anyway," Twilight said. "At first I thought you and Rainbow didn't get along here." "Are you kidding? He's my best friend. We just mess with each other a lot, hee. Anyway, I'm sorry you didn't get to taste the jam. It wasn't to eat, it was for a spell. But it's better that it's food than that, hee. Applejack kept eating and then looked at his reflection in the broth. Twilight. "Yeah. Do you have some pony you like in your reality?" Twilight looked out of the barn a little wistfully, then shook her head. "No. I did, but he wasn't from my reality either. There's another world, it's very different from mine and from this one. I have very good friends there too and, well, there's a guitar-playing boy there. But things never worked out between us." "A guitarist?" "Well, I play the ukulele and the banjo, hee. Twilight looked at him with a slightly blushing smile. "And not that that's why. I just... Well, there's similar instruments." "Relax, I think it's easier to have this conversation when it's just the two of us, no pressure. So, do you like girls like me?" Applejack swallowed and looked away. "Just because we like ponies like ourselves doesn't mean we're confessing, hee. It just means we have similar tastes. Yeah, I like guys like you, protective, honest, friendly, and with a good heart." Applejack looked at her, his eyes shining a bit, then smiled and nodded. "Well, yeah. I like girls like you, smart, pretty, kind-hearted, and friendly." Twilight blushed at the word pretty. It implied he was calling her pretty, but she tried to ignore that and just smiled. Without realizing it, they both leaned a little closer. They didn't say anything as they stared at each other. The evening light was coming through the barn's windows and door, but it was Applejack himself who suddenly pulled back and swallowed. "Thanks for bringing my plate." Twilight snapped out of it too and nodded, then looked away. "You're welcome. And thank you for inviting me. You can come over whenever you want." Twilight nodded with a smile and then got to her hooves. "Well, I'll go get Spike. I have to get back to send a letter to the prince and to talk with your Twilight." "That's right, you mentioned that book of yours worked. I'm glad to hear it. Say hi to her for me." Applejack said, then drank the rest of the broth and walked with her. "Let me walk you back, it's already getting late." Twilight nodded and began walking alongside him. Underscore 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 underscore. Messages 2. Dear Prince Celestial, I know it's strange for me to ask you this and I don't want to take advantage of your kindness, but I recently spoke with your original Twilight and she mentioned that she only has 2 tickets for the Grand Galloping Gala, so, to avoid problems with our friends, I decided it'd be a better idea to ask you for a ticket for each of them. I hope this isn't a bother for you. Sincerely, Twilight Sparkle. Spike finished writing down what Twilight said and then blew a little flame on the letter to send it. Did they really all fight over the ticket? Ha, what nonsense. I'm sure the gala is boring stuff for girls. I bet none of the guys will want to go. You think just like me, Spike. But yes, there was chaos over those tickets, so I prefer to get ahead of things a little. Twilight replied, then opened the book and wrote, I've already got the tickets covered, friend. After that, Twilight closed the book and turned towards Spike, just in time to see a letter from the prince fall onto the dragon's head. Those must be the tickets, Twilight said excitedly, then watched as Spike opened the letter. Ahem. Dear and faithful Twilight. I sent exactly 2 tickets because they're for you and Spike. Did you think they were for you and some guy? Don't even think about it, young lady. Spike read. Wow. Jealous dad, huh? Twilight froze in shock at the prince's reply, and immediately grabbed some paper and ink and began writing. Dear Prince Celestial, they're not for me and a guy. I actually want to invite my friends so there won't be any problems with any of them. In my reality there were some arguments over those tickets, that's why I think it's better if everyone has one. Without even dictating to Spike this time, she wrote it herself with her magic, then gave the letter to Spike, who sent it without question. A few seconds later, another letter arrived, and Spike opened it. Ahem. You're much too young to be thinking about inviting young stallions to a ball. Will it just be you and me? Twilight blushed a bit at the reply, but once again she grabbed paper and ink and started to write back. Dear Prince Seals. Before Twilight could write any more, another letter arrived and Spike opened it. Let's see. I know that at your age things start to change and you begin to look elsewhere. I still remember when you were my little Twilight, that little unicorn who loved magic. I know you want to make your own choices, but as your fath, looks like he tried to write father and scribbled over it. Anyway. As your mentor, it's my duty to guide you so you make the best choices. I'm doing this for your own good, my little one. He thinks I'm inviting some pony on a date? He thinks I'm inviting everyone on a date at once? Looks like it. After that, another letter arrived. This one did contain the 5 missing tickets. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. I know you're growing up. I shouldn't get in the way of your phases. I'm just worried. I trust that you'll make the right decision and that this is only about friendship. Tell that to my Twilight, please. Spike just started laughing and then handed the tickets to Twilight, who still couldn't believe what had just happened. After that, the book vibrated and Twilight looked at the message. Awesome. I hope you all have a great time.